Hospital Porter's pride and dignity. Stop the New World Order. Welcome to Panwo TV. Okay, it's the 22nd of December, and we've just had the longest night of the year, winter solstice, and it's now still dark. I think it's about 7:15 now, and it's still dark. So, welcome to the 50th parallel, ladies and gentlemen. That's what it's like in midwinter here. Oh man, yeah, I'm just on my way to work. The Great British Workman. 7 a.m. Sunday morning, just before Christmas. Last Sunday before Christmas. And what am I doing? I'm going to work. Just a quick job to do. Booked it last night. I wasn't going to do work today, but I'm going to now. And I'm heading to the cinema. Yeah, it's going to do another roving film review. Yeah, straight after the last one. So I'm going to see a different film this particular to the last one. The last one we did. The last one was It's a Wonderful Life. We're going from It's a Wonderful Life to Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. Yeah. Because it's probably the most convenient time for me, actually. I'm going to go to the 9:15 showing. Yeah, this is the same as when the last one, when all these big films get released, these major cinematic moments, they have multiple showings, even in the early morning at cinemas, because so many people want to see it. It was only released on Friday, so it's probably maybe the only one I can go to. It's not sold out, actually. We'll see anyway if it is sold out. You never know. But it's been a huge moment. I mean, Colin Wolford, bless him, my good mate. He went to a Star Wars extravaganza in London. It was like an all-day, sort of massive all-day event where he watched all of them, all the Star Wars movies, back to back. You know, the first trilogy, A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, then the prequels, I can't remember what they were called, the last George Lucas ones, and then he watched the first two of the new trilogy, The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, which of course I've reviewed. I'll include links in the description box to these, which is The Last Jedi. Sorry, the Force Awakens actually did a written review of that when it came out, which you can read on a Panmo Voice, and The Last Jedi did a roving Panmo TV review of, which you can also see. And as always, I mean, I'm curious to see this. As always, I've not read any reviews. I mean, as you know, if you watch regularly, my policy. Am I going? Oh, sorry, I was going out of focus. My policy is never to read a review of any film I've not seen if I intend to go and see it. I mean, there's a couple. I mean, remember, there was a couple I didn't mean to go and see, and I read the reviews and went to see them because I didn't want to go and see them. But this one I've not read the reviews of, and another reason I want to get it out of the way is because I want to read those reviews, or rather watch the YouTube reviews. I mean, I'm talking, when it comes to reviews, I'm talking mostly about the independent reviews. I mean, of course, I'll go through the Guardian and all that, like I normally do, but I want to watch the reviews by, like, the intellectual dark webbers on YouTube, Sargon of Akkad, Dave Cullen, etc., and the MGTOW community and things like that. I want to see what they have to say about it, because honestly, I mean, Sargon's review of, I mean, I didn't watch. See, Sargon of Akkad, of course, is one of these anti-feminist types, and he did a review of The Last Jedi, which was almost, if not more, entertaining than the actual film. It was like about half an hour long, and he made it really funny. He gave all the characters different names. Like there was Token. He called Finn Token, and he called the woman, the Oriental woman, whose name I can't remember in the last. He called her Diversity Hire, and he called that lady with the pink hair, who's in charge of the warship fleet. He called her Vice Admiral Gender Studies. And he was and he was always talking about the whamming. He talks about Ray, and he says, look at the whamming. Honestly, it was so funny. Now, because I can't avoid titles, I mean, because I subscribe to these people, I'm going to see the titles on the videos. So even though I haven't watched the videos, I'll be seeing the titles, and they are like, I know very well that the IDW is not impressed with this film, just looking at the titles on the videos, because I can't avoid them because they come up in my feed. But you know, Dave Cullen says, yes, it is really as bad as that, or something like that. So I know these guys are not impressed with this movie. This doesn't necessarily mean I'll agree with them. I just say I'm going in, I'm trying to keep my mind as blank as possible. I'm trying not to prejudge the movie, even though I trust, you know, I respect the judgment of Sargon and Dave and these other people. I respect their judgment, but I don't agree with them all the time. I mean, the classic case where I have clashed with the YouTube IDW is over Black Panther. If you remember, my review of Black Panther was very long, it's very extensive. It's almost as long as the actual movie. And because, like Sargon and the others, they did this review saying, oh, it's loaded with cultural Marxism, it's, you know, cultural Marxism everywhere. It's anti-white people, it's anti-men, things like that. Now, I went to see the film. I went in to see that film, and not because I've seen their reviews, but because someone has written to me and advised me to go and see it and do a review. Someone actually requested that I do a review of it, saying, look, Ben, it's full of cultural Marxism. You'll have a real field day taking it apart and slagging it off. So I went in there looking for cultural Marxism and expecting to find it. And I found very little or none. I think Black Panther is actually a really good movie. I think it's pretty harmless, actually. If you'd read my review, you'll see that I didn't agree with Sargon and the others. I didn't believe there's anything malevolent. There's no malevolent sort of left-wing propaganda in Black Panther. I really didn't. And I explained why in the review. So it could be that with this film it'll be the same. I mean, bear in mind that whenever I see a film in the cinema, you know, in the immediate hours after I've seen the film, I tend to regard it in better, more. I tend to regard it in a better light than I do later on when I thought about it. I mean, for example, if you remember that film Get Out, which I reviewed, I came out of the cinema thinking, yeah, good. not bad movie. I think I gave it 7 out of 10 or something. I look back at it now and realise it was awful, bloody awful, terrible movie. So again, the immediate aftermath of the film, I might not be in my best judgment, but I'm still going to give you my best. I'm going to give you the hotel. Isn't that lovely, the Christmas lights there? Do you remember my video on Christmas lights? Anyway, I'm almost at work now, so I'm going to go and do my work, and then we shall carry on this little discussion afterwards. Right, I finished work and I'm walking down the street. It's a lovely morning there. Down here in Littlemore, Oxford. I've just been passed by this rather strange wheeled vehicle that looks like something from Star Wars, actually. And you'll be familiar with where I'm going if you watch regularly. It's the View Cinema this time I'm going to go to. It's the View Oxford, which is it's probably my favourite cinema, actually. It's quite close to, it's pretty close to where I live. It's comfortable, it's in a nice setting, and yeah, I've also seen some of my favourite films there, you know. So it's nice to have a cinema. I don't have to go into the bloody city centre, because Oxford city centre is not my favourite place. So I'm now heading to the cinema, yeah, and to see Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. Now, it's an odd title. I mean, it's funny because like I saw the trailer, and because you can't really judge a movie from its trailer. And very often trailers are misleading, deliberately misleading. But anyway, it says the saga ends. So this is what it says. Is of course, this is what they're implying is this is going to be the last Star Wars movie in the main sequence. Like is I think they're calling it now the Skywalker saga to distinguish it from the various spin-offs. You know. There's all kinds of Rogue One and other kinds of spin-off movies. But of course, this won't be the end of the Star Wars franchise. I don't think I don't think Star Wars as a franchise will ever end for as long as the civilization endures, because it's just they will continue to I think they'll continue to make new ones. They're not part of the main saga, but there will be other Star Wars movies. I'm absolutely certain of that. They will continue. Star Wars for me is like it's a part of my life. It has always been a part of my life. Less so now than when I was a child, but it's something I've always loved. Ever since the first, I've told this story before, but I was very little. I won't say how little, but I was very little when the New Hope came out, and of course it was like the film that everyone wanted to go and see, and I went to see it with my parents. And in those days, I lived in Lampeter in West Wales, tiny little place, no cinema. The nearest cinema was actually Swansea. So it's changed now. There are more cinemas now. But we went all the way to Swansea, and I remember we couldn't get in. It filled up. We couldn't get in. So I cried. I mean, I cried my eyes out. And so my parents took me down to the beach by the Mumbles, and I saw people queuing up again. I said, "Can we go and see it now? Because look, there's going to be another showing." And they said, "No, we'll come back later." I did see it in the end. Empire Strikes Back. I remember when that came out. Now, when I went to see Empire Strikes Back, it was actually I went to see the double bill. My mum worked in a cinema in those days, so I used to get in for free because the managers used to let me in for free. And that was the Phoenix Picture House where I saw Dr. Strangelove, if you remember. Now, the Empire Strikes Back is, of course, a lot darker. It's probably the darkest of all Star Wars movies. Of course, it ends rather grimly with Han Solo encased in carbonite and Luke with his hand chopped off after he just had found out that "I am your father, Luke," as Darth Vader says. So he just found out that he's had this paternity bombshell and he's lost his hand. Not exactly easy viewing, is it? But it's considered. Everyone I've spoken to has considered it the finest Star Wars movie, and to be honest, I've come round to that thought myself. And it's unique among the Star Wars films because, well, you have that amazing scene or the act on Dagobah where Luke is learning the ways of the Force. And one of the biggest criticisms I have of the new trilogy is that Rey, the sort of female Luke Skywalker whamming kind of wannabe, Mary Sue and all that, well, you know what Sargon says about her, she never went through that. She seems to know how to use the lightsaber and everything else without any training. So Luke goes through it, and the training, the sequence of the act with Yoda is incredible. Firstly, you're introduced to this amazing character, Yoda. And then the following is really an incredible series of events that Luke experiences on that planet with Yoda. And it was only many years later that I've gone the wrong way. Hang on, where am I going? Oh, I was getting lost around here. Where do I go from here? Oh, I don't know. So I think I'm going the right way. So I'll find my way. I go this way, now I come to the bridge. Anyway, it's incredible because years after I watched that film, I read the books by Carlos Castaneda. It's about a young chap who makes friends with an old Red Indian shaman, and he goes through this shamanic training. There's a series of 4 books, which are really fascinating, and it harkened back to when I saw The Empire Strikes Back, and I can't help feeling that George Lucas got the idea from those books, because those books came out over a decade before Star Wars. So I got the feeling Lucas might have read them before he became a film director, and after that he got the idea. I don't know, but it's so similar. Return of the Jedi is incredible. And I very vividly remember going to the cinema to see it and being absolutely thrilled. Again, I got in for nothing. I watched it at the Phoenix, and being really looking forward to seeing it. Absolutely desperate to see it. And of course, it lived up to all its expectations. The very dramatic ending where Luke and Darth Vader had that incredible lightsaber fight which is beyond anything, any other piece of action anywhere in the entire Star Wars franchise, in my view. Which ends, of course, with that incredible moment where he cuts off Darth Vader's hand and he looks at his own false hand, and it's all symbolic, of course, of his own flirt with the dark side. Where the hell am I? Oh dear. I'm lost. What's the time? I can't believe it. Is this a Mandela effect or something? Where am I? 8:52, I've got time. I've got 25 minutes to get to the cinema. Where the hell am I? Alright, yeah, I'll carry on talking. That is incredible. Then he makes that decision to not to fight Darth Vader. And then the Emperor tries to kill him, and Darth Vader then kills the Emperor and goes back to the light side. It bugs me, actually, right? It really bugs me. Is that since those films came out, Lucas kept re-editing them. There's always new versions coming out, new director's cuts coming out. It's like the scene at the end of the Return of the Jedi. The original one had the actor who played the old Darth Vader as the Force Ghost. You see the Force Ghosts of it, the final shot of Return of the Jedi is you see Luke on not Bespin. What's it called? The moon, Endor. And he sees the Force Ghosts of Obi-Wan and Yoda and Anakin. Anakin is the real name of course, Darth Vader, and some people say it refers to Anunnaki, I don't know. But Anakin is his real name, but you see that Anakin and the other two, they replace that with the young Anakin. He also replaces the score with a different music, which is this kind of like, it was originally this kind of Ewok chant, and he replaces it with this kind of like flute thing. That's not as good. So Lucas kept going back and fiddling with the bloody films, putting new bits in, taking new bits out. Where the hell am I? Where the hell am I? Newman Academy. Where the fuck? I'm lost. I'm going to go back. I don't believe it. What's going on? Oh God. I think I must have gone the wrong way. That's right before. Anyway, yeah, I think I should have turned left rather than right when I saw. Oh God. Honestly, man, I call myself an ex-hospital porter. I could find a hidden room in the industrial block at the dead of night. I can't find my way to a cinema. All right, and so it annoyed me actually that Lucas keeps going back and he keeps fiddling with it. It's like when I think the worst example of that is, I don't mind putting in new graphics and stuff like that, like he puts in new graphics on at Mos Eisley and things like that, and new spaceships and stuff. I don't mind that so much. It's just like when Luke falls, because Luke tries to commit suicide at the end of Empire Strikes Back, and he luckily, by an amazing plot device, you get like he's saved by the people in the Millennium Falcon. But when he does that, Darth Vader, he's completely silent, he's completely unmoved, which he would be. Yet Lucas had him shouting, "No!" And I thought to myself, that is ridiculous. It's out of character. It's really cheap. It's shoddy, and it ruins it. It ruins that entire scene. Because Darth Vader wouldn't do that. Because Darth Vader, at the end of Empire Strikes Back, Vader is still evil. You see, he's not. He wouldn't go no like that. He'd do that at the end of Return of the Jedi. Oh, so I just said, George, for God's sake, will you please leave these films alone? They're great movies. Stop fiddling with them. Stop. It's like people keep polishing something when it's already clean. And of course, there was the prequels, the much anticipated prequel trilogy, which were called Phantom Menace, and two others whose names I can't remember, but I did see them all. And yeah, they were not up to the standards of. They were greeted with quite a lukewarm response by the fans and the critics. Well, sod the critics, but the fans are what counts. And they were a bit underawed by them. To be honest, they're not as good. I mean, they have their good things, they have their good elements. They're not bad films, but they're not magnificent. And that's the problem. I mean, I talked about this with Slaxer when he was reviewing Red Dwarf. Once you achieve, if you're an artist of any kind, writer, musician, painter, filmmaker, any kind of artist, and you achieve greatness, then your fans will never be satisfied with anything less. They will never again be content with, unless you maintain that. And greatness is a very difficult thing to maintain and to reproduce, as we've seen with, the Slaxer's reviews of the Red Dwarf episodes really reveal that, because some of them are great, some of them are just awful in the later series. And the prequels, I think, were very visually stunning. And then I think when George Lucas started fiddling with the original trilogy, he went to his head a bit, and he started, oh right, no, I'm going the wrong way, I should have gone that way, it's okay. And he started getting a bit too big for his boots and thinking, all I have to do is put in fancy graphics, CGI, and wow people with CGI, and it won't matter. And that's all I need to do. But of course that's not true, is it? It is a film, it's not an art gallery. You need a convincing storyline, you need good characters, you need a good script, you need intrigue, you need all these things. You need all these things go into a movie. If you have those things, you don't need fancy special effects. I mean, one of my favourite science fiction productions is Blake 7, which was a British sci-fi series. Very, very good. I've done an article about that on the main Hapanwo blog if you want to read it. I don't think I've done any videos about it specifically, but it's incredible. Yeah, it's very, very. Technically, it's very crude. I mean, it was famous even for the time it was made, which was like 1978 to 81. It was renowned. It was poor, technically, renowned for its very, very homespun special effects. You know, the spaceships on strings and stuff. But indeed, Blake 7 tried to experiment. They released an experimental episode with new CGI images cut in, and the fans went nuts. They went absolutely crazy with fury. They said, "Don't you dare touch that! Give us back our spaceships on strings." And I think creators of science fiction don't always understand the fans. They don't understand that science fiction fans are extraordinarily conservative and sentimental people. Anyway, I was saying that Blake 7 had all those things. It had great plot, wonderful characters, very well written, fascinating, incredibly deft script writing, good acting. So no one missed the fact there was the special effects were crap. Conversely, if you have an awful storyline, useless actors and characterization, and terrible plot devices and things like that, then good special effects will not save it. Case in point, Independence Day. So the prequel trilogy, I think they did skimp on that a bit, and then of course Lucas, I think he just lost his. I don't know if he lost interest or what it was. I think there must have been a bit of a blow to him, because he did put a lot into the prequel trilogy, and I think he's very dedicated to what he was doing. He called his films his kids. He says these are like children to me, these films. So then he sold the franchise to Disney for a lot of money. I mean, he made a lot of money out of it, and I don't blame him. I mean, only I don't blame him for I wouldn't sell that thing very cheaply. I think he was over £1 billion pounds, which I don't think is fair enough. And then of course J.J. Abrams came in as director, and you ended up, who previously did Star Trek. He did some very good Star Trek movies, actually, Abrams. Very, very good. But Star Trek and Star Wars are two very different things. I mean, they're very different in tone, very different types of movies. Star Wars is kind of a space opera. I mean, it's not really science fiction. I mean, people say, well, what do you mean? Of course it's science fiction. Spaceships and lasers. Yeah, but that's not what science fiction is. Star Wars is much, I think, has more in common with some of the medieval Look at that puddle. I'm going to walk around this. I haven't got my work boots on today. I couldn't be bothered to put them on. It has more in common with like medieval fantasy epics, I think. Despite its setting in space, in obviously high technology society, it's very medieval in its style. Star Trek is distinctly different. It's distinctly, it provides Star Trek provides an image of the future which is optimistic, but it is distinctly sci-fi. It's futuristic and sci-fi. Futurism and sci-fi are two different things, by the way. Futuristic simply means something set in the future. It doesn't have to be sci-fi. Sci-fi can be futuristic. It's usually futuristic. You can get sci-fi set in the present day. You can even have historical science fiction stories. Got all those steampunk ones, you know. Anyway, Abrams got to work on the new trilogy, of which the final part it was released on last Friday. I'm going to go and see now. If I get there on time, I should do. What is the time? Let me just check the time. I'm nearly at the cinema now. Oh, just gone 9 o'clock. Yeah, I got plenty of time. I got 15 minutes almost. And well, I've done reviews of those for Hapanwo. I did a written review for The Force Awakens, and a movie, like a roving review like this one, for The Last Jedi. Now, I'm curious to see, because obviously there's a little bit of an intrigue here, because the title of the film is The Rise of Skywalker. Now, of course, the film, The Last Jedi, ended with Luke Skywalker's death after being the hero of the entire original trilogy and being born at the end of the prequels. He he dies. He goes and lives on some remote island somewhere, like a monk. It was actually filmed in a medieval monastery off the coast of Ireland, and like every evil white male does, you know. He's just a crusty old white man, a white male. And his role is taken over by the Whammon, the Mary Sue, Ray, and Finn, the Token, the diversity hire hero, former stormtrooper who turns good, and Luke dies, and I'm assuming he becomes a Force ghost. So is it? I mean, when he's rising, I mean, what's the Rise of Skywalker? I mean, if he comes back, it's going to be like he's going to be a Force ghost, isn't he? Like Obi-Wan did. Obi-Wan came back in Empire and Red Jedi, didn't he? And as a Force ghost. Indeed, in A New Hope, do you remember, he actually comes back immediately as a Force. Well, he speaks to Luke from the being in the part of the Force, and he says, "Run, Luke, run." And he also, when Luke's destroying the Death Star, he says, "Use the Force, Luke." So I'm curious to see exactly how they're going to wangle this one. But I mean, obviously, I do share a lot of the concerns of people like Sargon of Akkad and Dave Cullen. I mean, especially over The Last Jedi. I mean, as I think I saw The Force Awakens a bit through rose-tinted glasses. I thought it was pretty good when I saw it. Now I look back and think it wasn't that good. Too much like, it's just like a remake of The New Hope, as many people say. Same plot. You have the First Order instead of the Empire. And Rey is like Luke Skywalker. She's like a female Luke Skywalker on a planet called Jakku, which is basically Tatooine under another name. The new trilogy, though, is, I think, an improvement on the prequels in the sense that it's not so special effects heavy. It doesn't rely. I think they learned their lesson from the failure of the prequels in that respect. But of course, it's there. I mean, the feminist propaganda and things, which Sargon and Dave talked about, are there, and you get them in all movies now, it seems. And although, as I've said at the time, you know, against this sort of thing can't last forever, because at some point the shareholders are going to say, look, the shareholders of the production company are going to say, look, where's our money? What's happened to our money? Why are we not getting our returns on this film? And as Dave Cullen made a good video the other day, Computing Forever, the YouTube channel, where he says he feels that wokeness may be a passing phase that's already showing signs of departing, because the trailer for the new Ghostbusters movie is much more traditional. It goes back to its roots, whereas of course the third Ghostbusters movie is all-female one, which is an absolute joke. It was pathetic. So I think the thing about making these things like multicultural and with feminist principles in, most people don't like it. And like, you know, the viewing figures for the new Doctor Who, the female Doctor Who, is like they plummeted. I haven't even watched it, but to be honest, I stopped watching it when Matt Smith came along because he was so awful. I didn't watch Peter Capaldi at all. Anyway, we're at the cinema now, so going to go on in there, watch the movie, and then we'll see what it's like afterwards. I just come out and the sun's out. It's really sunny now. Oh wow, yeah, what a movie. I've got to bear in mind that I may change my mind about it afterwards, as is often the case, but it was quite something. And there's going to be spoilers. Just to let you know, there will be spoilers, and there are quite a few surprises in there that you might not want to be spoiled. Quite a few like plot twists and things you might not want to be spoiled. And there's it's a lot more emotionally engaging than the others. I must say this is supposedly the end of the saga, although Return of the Jedi was that really, wasn't it? There'll be more, I'm sure. There'll be more, I'm sure. I'm just going to get over the road here. A bit complicated. This bit, I'll just get onto the path, which leads me to the way home. Now, it's interesting actually. Like, I'm on the Mindset podcast this afternoon, so but by the time you watch this, it'll probably be uploaded and live. So check out because probably the subject of this film might come up. So it's probably a good idea I've seen it before I go there. But before I go on to the show, just because if Gareth and the others haven't seen it, you know, there may be spoilers, or if I hadn't seen it, they wouldn't be able to talk about it because of spoilers. But I'm going to give you some spoilers. There's some. It's really I would say it's much better than the others. I would say it's a lot better than the other new trilogies. That is the third trilogy, you know, as opposed to the original trilogy. And it begins with a featurette. I mean, before the film starts, there's a little featurette showing lots of outtakes from the various shows, lots of behind-the-scenes videos, and they just say thank you for everything, for your thank you for you know, being good fans of the movies and stuff like that, as if they are terminating this particular series of films. Although of course there's going to be lots of spin-offs, absolutely no doubt. I mean, the Star Wars universe really is as real as the Tolkienian universe, or indeed this one. It's like, well, it's all the Harry Potter universe. I mean, these imaginary worlds can be as rich and intense and detailed as the physical world. I mean, the human mind is an amazing thing to conjure up these kinds of wonderful, wonderful places. As in the film Contact, the aliens say to the explorer from Earth, "You're capable of such beautiful dreams," and we are. Now, I was any fears, any concerns that I had that this would just be another rehash, you know, because as I said, the Force Awakens was a bit too much like A New Hope in terms of its storyline. Those were gone. Those were dashed because, not dashed. Those were relieved because this was a completely unique film in terms of its plot line. Now, I think they may have learned something from the previous failures, because at the beginning of the film, you see that Rey is actually doing training in the Force, and Leia is teaching her. Now, the first shot of her has her like levitating or sitting lotus with rocks flying around her. Remember that's like a scene from Yoda and Yoda and Luke. So she's learning the Force now, although kind of. So she's not so much a Mary Sue in this film, although it's kind of a fait accompli because she was in the previous films. But her character really comes out better in this film. Rey comes out better. I mean, I think based on her portrayal in this film, she's far more than she was in the previous ones, and it's not fair just to say she's a female Luke Skywalker. They put in there to please the feminists. I mean, obviously, that's no longer the case, I would say, with this. So it could, in fact, I mean, obviously, I've seen the titles of Sargon's and Days. I say the Coach Red Pill basically has done what I did. He came out of the Coach Red Pill, another YouTuber I follow. He's a kind of MGTOW, kind of MRA. He came out of the cinema and he filmed himself coming out the cinema like I did. He said, "It's a piece of shit." Just to let you know, I'm going to start a live stream when I get home. Spoilers coming and stuff. I don't know. I haven't seen his. Obviously, I had seen no reviews yet. I'm interested to hear what these people have to say about it. Again, cultural Marxism. I don't think there was any. I really don't think there was any. So I'm interested to see why Sargon and Dave Cullen don't like it. I'm interested to see why that is. Because, maybe as with Black Panther, I didn't see any there, like I said, but there was none. There were some black spots. I mean, there were some bad things. Now, Leia was in it. Now, you think, well, how can that be? Because her actress is dead. Carrie Fisher, the actress who played Leia in all the Star Wars movies she was in, died last year. She died in 2016. She was part of the mass celebrity cull in 2016, if you remember that. Well, they were all dropping like flies. It's very sad. She was 61, I think, and her mother, Debbie Reynolds, another actress, she died the next day. It was probably usually from grief. You can die from a broken heart. They had a joint funeral for the two of them. But you see, I think they should have written her out in the bloody last film. It'd have been very easy to just write her out. She did die before the film was released, and it would have been a simple matter to edit it together to make that a bit more convenient. Now, they brought it's a bit sinister really, because she appears in it in quite a few scenes, and obviously she's a synthespian, as they call them. In other words, she's simply a computer-generated image, and this has been. And you wouldn't know. There's no way of knowing that, because digital imagery is so good now that it is virtually the same as reality, and you can't tell the difference between one and the other. You just can't. So that was quite. I suppose seeing her, I mean, it would be better, as I said, they had an opportunity to write her out in the last film, actually. They could have easily edited it to make it that way, because the ship was hit, if you remember from The Last Jedi, her ship was hit by some kind of missile, and she was blown out into space. I don't know why these spaceships have, like, you know, the command centre on the spaceships are always like on the outside of the craft with these big windows you can easily smash. It makes them very vulnerable. So anyway, she uses the Force to get back on board the ship. Wouldn't it be simpler just to kill her off then? It'd be very convenient to get rid of her, but they bring her back, and she does actually die in this. Finally, she dies. She becomes a Force ghost at the end of in this particular film. But it's just, I just wonder what her family think about her appearing in CGI form in the middle of this movie, a film which was made after she died. Perhaps they like that, perhaps they're pleased about that, I don't know. But her family, I don't know, I think it's a bit weird, it'd be a bit weird. And they've done this sort of thing for quite a while. I mean, I remember that Oliver Reed died in the making of Gladiator. And so, they were going to just like hit the insurance company and reshoot all his scenes, but then decided to like keep the footage that they'd already got with him and do some CGI for the rest. And so, you know, some of the scenes in that film Oliver Reed's character, Proxima he's called, is simply a digital ghost, a digital image. So I don't know what the ethics of that actually are. Poe is in it. Now Poe is the guy who first appears in The Last Jedi. I remember he has a big conflict with Vice Admiral Gender Studies. I don't know I can't remember what her real name was. I know the actress, quite a good actress. I can't remember what her real name was. I just know I know her by Sargon's nickname, Vice Admiral Gender Studies. Now this is some of the annoying. There are some annoying elements to these, certainly the new series. As you know, Han Solo gets killed off in the Force Awakens. He's killed by his son Ben. Good name that. Who is also, where am I going? Am I going to get lost again? I think I'm going to go this way. Hang on. I think I'll go this way. Who's known as Kylo Ren. That's it. There's interesting what happens with him. I'll come to that in a minute. But so Han Solo is killed off in Force Awakens, but another character comes in the next film called Poe Dameron. Poe Dameron, he's just Han Solo. He's the same character. He's just really a rehash of the same character. They bring back essentially the same character who plays the same role, has the same personality, looks very similar. That's annoying. I found that annoying. That bugged me. Bad piece of writing then. It would be better to create a new character. I mean, Finn, I must say, Finn is actually that kind of character. Finn is not actually, he doesn't signify any other character in the past that has been lost. I mean, he is, just going to go this way, sorry, I just don't want to get the sun in your eyes. Finn is a character who emerged in The Force Awakens and is pretty much, he plays his own unique role. There's a couple of there's a bit of like an open-ended thing. I mean, I don't know, I suspect at one point Finn says to Rey, he thinks they're about to die, they're about to be sucked into this quicksand on one of these places, and he says to Rey, there's something I've never told you, or there's something I need you to know, and she says, what? And then they get sucked down. And they survive, and after she says, what's it you wanted to tell me? She says, oh, it doesn't matter. I think he's in love with her. I think he's got like a crush on her. That's my suspect is that Finn has, and it's an unrequited crush on Rey. And also, I think that Poe also does. Now, this is kind of reminiscent of A New Hope, because that's actually there's kind of a bit of a love triangle in A New Hope between Han, Luke and Leia, before Luke discovers that Leia is his sister. And it seems it's a bit similar with Poe, Finn and Rey. The thing about it is, though, it's Rey, if he does love her, he never tells her. Sometimes it's better not to, actually. I've learned that lesson the hard way myself. It's sometimes better to keep these things to yourself. But he doesn't tell her. And what's more, I think I'll go down the back alleyway. It's muddy, but it's not. And so we never find out exactly what that was, which is a bit of a, maybe in the outtakes, maybe there'll be some, maybe it was edited out. In which case, you know, that's a plot hole, really. It's like a false cloud, as they call it. You don't know. It's like something put in there and doesn't really lead anywhere. Rey herself is actually she's quite asexual, actually. And not only is she she's quite sort of androgynous as a woman, and you know, short hair, wears sort of like masculine trousers because she's quite sort of she has a kind of, she carries herself in a masculine way. I mean, the closest we get to romance is her and Ben Solo. Now, so that's a bit of a bummer. Now, I'm going to go down this back alley. Oh, look at that. It's muddy along here too, but at least it's quiet. And, so I can do some filming in peace. There's there's this thing called the Final Order, which is the third set of bad guys, who are really, really very similar to the old bad guys. In other words, they're like the First Order and like the Empire. They have the same kind of uniforms, the same kind of ships, spacecraft, the same hardware, everything. With very, very little design difference in terms of their structure. They have the stormtroopers and stuff. Now, there's again, the bad guys like the Empire. They're all. This is something that people noticed in the first movie. The good guys all have American accents, and the bad guys all have English accents. Now, it's an Anglo-American production with an international cast. It always has been since it first started. But we didn't notice. I mean, it's not unique. It's not completely universal. For example, Mon Mothma, who was one of the rebel leaders, she was English. I don't know with the accent. I mean, she spoke with an English accent. Now, of course, in reality, they're speaking this Galactic Basic, so they're not actually. The reason we hear them speak English is for the convenience of the viewers. They're actually speaking Galactic Basic, which is the language of Star Wars, the principal language of Star Wars, as many others. As we know, C-3PO can speak 6 gazillion of them, or whatever. But the principal language everyone uses is it's the lingua franca of the Star Wars universe is Galactic Basic, which is not English. But so, why do they have accents? I mean, for example, Finn is played by John Boyega, who is British. He's a black guy, I think, has roots in the Dark Continent somewhere, Nigeria or Ghana or somewhere, I don't know. But he's British by nationality, and he speaks with a standard English accent. He was in this good film actually about aliens. It was quite. He played a guy in this film. In this film about aliens landing. That's quite good, I remember. But John Boyega thinks Finn speaks with a bloody American accent. Why have they given him that accent? It's, to me, that's just cheap. Why dialect coach him into speaking like an American when he's playing an alien in a distant galaxy far, far away, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away? Why? I don't know. But Ray, of course, is English. She's played by an English actress, and she speaks with an English accent. So, again, that's a weird thing. Now, I'm pleased to say that they didn't. That the only sort of diversity Bechtel kind of thing they were doing, you know, where they have to test you for, you know, ideological purity, was that at least some of the bloody bad guys were black. See, in the Imperial ship, some of the crew were black. Now, in previous shows, in previous films, all the bad guys were white. They not only spoke with English accents, they were all white, sort of red-haired, blonde-haired guys, you know. And it's like, that's so racist. But they do have a couple of black people. Of course, they speak, you know, posh English accent like they all do. But there's a couple of black people in the Empire now. And in fact, one of them is this woman who is a new character. I really liked her actually. She's this very spirited kind of lady who lives on this planet where the Death Star crashes in near Endor, not on Endor but near it, and she rides these creatures that are a bit like horses. Now she's used to be like in the Stormtroopers. She's like Finn because she and her people were actually once Stormtroopers, and like Finn they were ordered to commit a war crime and they refused. They mutinied. It's one of the things I like about Finn. I mean, in the first series, I mean, I know Finn is a diversity hire, and Sargon nicknamed him that, but he is. I mean, it was actually J.J. Abrams who went to a casting session once in Hollywood, and he said, I couldn't believe it. I was disgusted that people were all so fucking white. And that's a quote. They were so fucking white. I mean, it's like fucking white. He didn't just say white, he had to put an expletive before it, which is, I think, very sinister. And when it comes to sort of like affirmative action, positive discrimination, whatever you choose to call it, you know what I think of that. You know how much I'm against it. However, Finn, I think, maybe has... I mean, in the beginning, I was annoyed by that at the beginning, because I knew that John Boyega had been cast for that reason. So he may well have been cast in the place of another actor who couldn't get the job because he was a white male. A white male. You know. However, I think over the course of the trilogy, Finn has earned his spurs. The actor playing him has earned his spurs. I think that character has, I think, become what it needs to be, and John Boyega has played him well. So I think that is something, that is a criticism. I won't drop the criticism of why he was given the job, but I think he has done a good job of playing that role. I think he has. This lady, the lady I'm talking about, is this other stormtrooper. I mean, the thing I admired most about Finn's character was he was this stormtrooper who, this Imperial stormtrooper who basically he rebels because of conscience, and I sometimes wish more soldiers would do that. I really do. Maybe there's a lesson there for military people. Now, Lando Calrissian comes back into it. There's a lot of old guys, all the old cast are sort of reunited because Lando Calrissian comes back in. He's pretty old now. I can't remember the name of the actor who played him. I think it's Kerry somebody. He comes back into it, and he's an old guy, but he's still General Calrissian, and he takes part in the space battles, like he did when he was first in it, in Empire Strikes Back or Return of the Jedi. You remember Calrissian actually comes, to begin with, he's a bad guy who turns good. And I mean, this idea of the bad redeeming themselves is a recurring theme in Star Wars. And Calrissian is one of these people. Calrissian is not so much a malicious man, but he's a very weak man to begin with. In Empire Strikes Back, he betrays the heroes, Luke, Leia, Han Solo. He basically sells them to the Empire. But then he regrets it, and he redeems him. He basically redeems himself. He makes good of his badness, what he did wrong. He makes it good again. It's nice to see him back. Yeah, he's an old guy. I'd like to say old. He's still got the tash, still got the sort of like smile and everything. He's still the same guy, same character, with all the same mannerisms, lots of laughter and stuff. Now, Han Solo briefly appears as a recollection by his son Ben Solo. He just reappears as not as a Force ghost, but as a recollection in his son's mind. Now this is interesting indeed. Now there's a couple of really, as I said, this is much more emotionally intense than the previous ones in the trilogy. There's not been this much sort of like emotional intensity in a Star Wars film probably since Return of the Jedi. But there's a couple of moments in particular where I was really blown emotionally, and one of those is for a moment, just for a few minutes. You think Chewbacca's dead. Again, I told you there'd be spoilers, didn't I? You think Chewie's dead. And I was gutted. I started to cry, and I was like, oh God, I did. I don't think I was the only one in the cinema who started to weep at that moment. But then then you realise he's still alive, and I cried again. It's now there's another moment. It's C-3PO. C-3PO, as you know, he's played by Anthony Daniels again, the same guy who's always played him. He must be pretty old now. But C-3PO is as sort of like annoying as ever, and he's sort of like everyone likes him really, but he's very annoying, and he's sort of like he's got this manner about him. He's a protocol droid, and I suppose he's a bit of a figure of contempt. But he is. There's this very touching moment actually, because they have to get something out of his memory, some information. Because they have to get to this planet where Palpatine is. Then Palpatine comes back. That's another thing that should let you know. He's sort of like been cloned and reborn, and there's millions of Palpatine clones everywhere. It's really scary. Emperor Palpatine, of course, was the evil one from Return of the Jedi onwards. One of the good things about the prequel trilogy actually is it gives you the backstory of Palpatine, how he becomes the Emperor, and basically how the Empire is created out of the Galactic Republic. and it's very, very reminiscent of the real world. It's really quite something. Anyway, yeah, I was right. Yeah, C-3PO. They have to get some information so they can find Palpatine from, and it's in C-3PO's memory banks, but he can't get it out because he's programming. You know, there's several times when he does these really stupid things. He says, "I'm sorry, I'm terribly sorry, sir, but my programming compels me to do this." And that happens again. And so they take him to basically a computer hacker who's like this little gremlin teddy bear like thing. They basically plug his brain into this computer, and then they say, "Look, I'm afraid we can get the information out, but it will mean we'll have to wipe C-3PO's entire memory." And C-3PO again agrees. He says, "I'll do it." But then he stands up and he looks at them. He says, and they say, "What's up, C-3PO?" And they're not gloating about it. He says, "I just want to have one last moment to look at my friends." And he says, he's consigned himself to this fate of being essentially deleted. I mean, he still exists. I mean, afterwards he's still himself, but he has no memory. He's like a blank slate. The sun's in a bad angle. Sorry, the sun is in a bloody bad angle for filming at the moment. It's just sort of behind me. Trying to get the sun in the frame. Really bugger the camera up. And that is a poignant moment, I must say, when he does that. There's no self-pity about him, no complaining. He just says, "I'd like one more moment to look at my friends." It's all very calm and it's all very dignified, and that I found very touching. It's funny, like they manage to rescue Chewie, but they have to get on board an Imperial starship, and the sets are all the same. I mean, this one thing you get with Star Wars. There is this continuity of production design. The sets are the same ones. The sets are so. For example, when they go and get Chewie, he's in a prison cell, and it's exactly like the one that Leia was in. You remember the prison block on the Death Star where Leia was kept captive. It's exactly the same. I mean, it's exactly the same kind of scenery in the film. It's the same scenery they put in. It's identical. So there's a lot of this continuity. I think they've learnt that. Another feature of this film is healing, and that's very important. But and again, there's almost like there's several situations which are almost Christian in their appearance, in their atmosphere, in their iconography. Especially, there's some healing scenes, like both Rey and Kylo Ren. If you remember, Kylo Ren is like is Ben Solo. He's Han Solo and Leia's son, and he turns to the dark side. He fails where Luke succeeded. He turns to the dark side and he becomes Kylo Ren, and he has to battle. In the previous films, he has to battle with his commitment to the dark side. It's almost like an inversion of Darth Vader. He is in the dark side, but he has this light side. No, not an inversion. Sorry, an inversion of Luke, where Luke he's a Jedi, but he has to battle this dark side that keeps trying to come in. Kylo Ren is the Sith. He's the Sith Lord, but he has this light side keep trying to come in the form of Rey, who has a telepathic communication with him. And they battle. There's several scenes where they fight each other with lightsabers, and then she stabs him with her lightsaber, and he collapses. And I thought he was dead. I mean, everyone else who's stabbed like that with a lightsaber dies. Just stabbed through the midriff with a lightsaber. As you know, Kylo Ren has this really weird lightsaber that looks like a Ku Klux Klan cross of fire, and it's like flickering. It has a flickering blade, and it's like it's creepy. Then Rey heals him. She uses the Force to heal his wound, and that changes him. I mean, that's when he has just after that he has the vision of Han Solo, his father, that comes to him, this memory, and you suddenly realise, and this is his kind of road to Damascus moment. He casts off the dark side. There we go. Rey she tries to run away from everything. She goes to Luke's island, and she destroys the spaceship, and then Luke appears. She nicks Ren's spaceship, but she doesn't realise he's turned good. Then Luke appears as a Force ghost, and she goes back with the lightsabers. Now she goes after Palpatine, and she takes Luke's X-Wing fighter, the old X-Wing fighter, Luke threw in the sea. He brings it out of the sea like Yoda did in The Empire Strikes Back. It's a repeat scene. And she flies and she confronts Palpatine. Now Palpatine is very interesting because Palpatine wants Rey alive, because Palpatine wants Rey to unite with her to create, to kill him, to kill his body, his cloned body, so she can then become the princess of the Sith, the Empress, in other words. And Ren wants her to join with him so they can defeat Palpatine and the good guys and the Jedi. So it's like a three-way, it's a very complicated sort of warfare situation. There's like a three-way split between the different factions. It's very, very odd. And it's again, there's this choice of lightness and darkness. Now, I don't know what she was going to do, because Palpatine killed Rey's parents, it turns out, and she wants revenge on him. But by killing him, she becomes him. And there's this kind of it's almost like Ahab in Moby Dick. You know, this idea that revenge is essentially self-destructive. To become obsessed with revenge, it inevitably leads to your own destruction. I don't know if that's actually true, but certainly that's the case with the Ahab character in Moby Dick. At the end of the book, he's dragged down to the sea by the whale he's trying to kill, the white whale. But in the end, when Kylo Ren redeems himself and he goes back to the light side, then the power balance shifts, and now they unite to defeat the darkness. And then it's a very sad and kind of poignant scene. Ben Solo, as he is then, he heals Rey in the same way. He heals Rey of her wounds when he thinks she's dead, and then he dies. And first they kiss, which is the closest Rey has got to any kind of sexual role in the series, and then he dies and he disappears, and like they do in the Force, and he becomes a Force ghost. That's a very interesting kind of and then that means that they can defeat the new First Order battleships, which have these planet-killing guns on board them, like mini Death Stars, and they're blowing up planets. It's very interesting because there's these moments where you think it's all over because Palpatine is destroying the ships, and then first there's not enough of the rebel ships, but then suddenly all these ships come up, all these sort of independent ships, like Lord of the Rings when the Rohirrim start joining forces with the Gondors at the Battle of Middle Earth, and they say on the ship, where are these ships coming from? What are they? What do they represent? And someone says, sir, they're just people. So the people of the galaxy unite to throw off the Empire. I keep walking, so the sun's in the wrong place, like I said. It's funny, because there are two. Rey has two lightsabers. This is how she managed to succeed what she's doing, because she has two lightsabers. And when at first point, when Palpatine realises he can't convert her, he tries to kill her like he did Luke, and she manages to beat him because she has two lightsabers, and she holds them up in the shape of a cross, like one like that side, one that side, in the shape of a cross. These two green lightsabers. The good guys in Star Wars always have green or blue lightsabers. That's the rule, or yellow. They're either yellow, blue, or green, and the bad guys have red lightsabers. That's the deal. That's the rule. It's always been that way. And so all the energy that Palpatine, the death energy, the death rays that Palpatine is hurling at Rey, then get deflected back to him by this cross-like structure. Again, that's very Christian. I don't know if that's a coincidence. I mean, there's been other times when, two lightsabers have been used as a cross, like when Dooku was killed by what's his name? By Anakin killed Dooku. Before he became Darth Vader. And there's a very long epilogue of group hugging and happy music and sort of a joyful scene of victory and reunion and loss for those who died. And it's a very... It is quite sad. I mean, there's this one scene when you think the rebel fleet are going to be beaten, when you just see these ships crashing down and blowing up, and you hear radio chatter in the background of them just talking to each other. That's the only sound. I mean, there's no other dialogue, there's no other music. You just hear that. And it's very, very effective. Now, I'm just going to... I'll perhaps do some more later, but basically you do feel that is an end to the saga. You do. So I'm nearly home now. I've got to be on mindset soon. You do feel that it is kind of drawing a line under it. I don't believe for a second there's not going to be more Star Wars movies, because there are. But there is a kind of something terminal about this. I must admit, there is something final, and it's happy. So, all in all, that was a good movie. It was a good movie. I'm curious to see what Sargon and Dave and the others had to say about it, but because they all hated it. I mean, I haven't watched their reviews, like I said, but they hated it. I thought that was pretty good. I think of the final 3 trilogies, that was good. That was a good film. I don't want to put it on numbers, and I know I'll probably see it differently later on, maybe in a couple of days or a couple of weeks. I think I'll remember it differently, but I enjoyed that, and there was none of the annoying feminism and cultural Marxism in it, or very little, that so bugs me about other movies. No, it's not. It's very, very different. Like the film Get Out, I remember I reviewed that film Get Out. That is very much loaded with that kind of thing, and that's extremely. I don't like it at all for that reason. So if you watch the trailer's quite honest, actually. Now, I say trailers can be misleading. They can sometimes give you a false impression of the film. I watched a film called The Passenger, which is about a guy on board a spaceship who was another sci-fi. I love sci-fi. And he's like a sleeper ship, and he's on like a 100-year mission. And he wakes up in the middle of it. He can't get back to sleep, so he's stuck on his own on this ship. And the trailer gives you the impression there's some kind of mystery behind that, like he's been woken up deliberately for some reason by someone else. And that's not true, but the trailer is misleading. The trailer misleads the viewer, and I think that's dishonest. When filmmakers do that, it's very dishonest. It really is. Well, you know what comes next, guys? Let's have a look at the critics, shall we? Okay, there's one more thing I want to add, actually, to my own view of this, and this is one of the coolest aspects, I think, of this film, is the return of the Death Star. Now, this is the second Death Star, the one that was in Return of the Jedi. And was destroyed by the space fleet in the typical Star Wars manner. And as often happens with Star Wars, you have this big space battle going on concurrently with a single hand-to-hand combat between one of the other characters in a separate scene of action. So there's like a single hand-to-hand combat with one of the other characters against an enemy in the separate scene of action. In the case of Return of the Jedi, it was Luke and Darth Vader and the Emperor and the space battle going on. In this case, it was Kylo and Rey. Now, Kylo and Rey meet up and have an amazing battle, an amazing confrontation on the ruins of the Death Star. Now, the Death Star is blown up, but amazingly, when you look at the explosion in Return of the Jedi, some of the fragments are partly intact. And they actually fell down onto one of the planets in the Endor system, not onto Endor itself, but onto the planet with all the where they crash, where the Millennium Falcon comes down, and they meet the lady with the horses. I talked about the princess, and as you see here, they actually have a fight in the ruins of what you can see here, very well constructed derelict Death Star. And if you watch Return of the Jedi, you'll immediately recognise this as the throne room of the Emperor, with the big circular window behind him. And basically they have a fight in the same location that Luke and Darth Vader had their final confrontation in Return of the Jedi, albeit it's semi-flooded and it's
derelict, as you can see, with all rubbish and wreckage everywhere. But it's incredible. It's an incredible idea. It really is. And it's an amazing location for this kind of scene. Not just because it's very well designed, and it's fascinating to see it brought back into the Star Wars universe, into the Star Wars storyline, but the fact that it is the very same location. It is the very same location where Luke and Darth Vader had their final fight, which is that climactic scene, which probably should have been the end of the entire saga, really. They shouldn't. Well, the saga should have just ended there, and they should have just drawn a line under it and quit while they were ahead. But this fight between Rey and Kylo has a similar result, because it's then you get the scene where she heals him, and that he has this vision of his father, Han Solo, and he goes over to the light side. He finally conquers the evil within himself. And it is a remarkable scene. Yes, it lacks the drama and the pathos of the one in Return of the Jedi, I know, but like I said, you could never ever stop that. It's impossible. And like I said, once you achieve that, I mean, it's everything's been done in Star Wars. One of the reasons so many people despise it, is the new Star Wars, is because they're comparing it to the original, and I do too. But I just thought this was a very, very neat touch. I like the fact that you see the wreckage of the Death Star, as improbable it is that such a large fragment would survive the explosion you see at the end of Return of the Jedi. And they save the Ewoks on the moon of Endor. There's a brief scene with the Ewoks, and it's really cool, because of course they sort of celebrate, and they see the starships getting blown up. But that is one of the things I really liked about this particular film. So let's start our series of reviews with Rotten Tomatoes. Yes, you've got to start there, haven't you? This is the aggregator of all the critics and what the critics have to say, because we can't ignore the critics, have we? We've got to go along with what they say and obey them, lest we defy them. And you know already, if you watch regularly, what I think of this idea of defying the critics. But anyway, here it is, Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. Critics' consensus is Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker suffers from a frustrating lack of imagination, but concludes this beloved saga with fan-focused devotion. It does, actually. The second part, I think, is true. As for a lack of imagination, I don't think that's quite fair. I think there is imagination in it, and some elements of this were quite original, and they impressed me. As you can see here, the tomatometer, that is the critics overall, that is the collector of all the critics' statistics and stars and everything else, give it 58%, but it has an 86% audience score, so that's a bit higher. And well, I think the audience score counts much more than the critics. I'd probably give it something similar, actually. It is a good film. It's not a great film, but it's a good film. It's worth seeing. And now, rather unusually, we're going to go to space.com. Now, space.com is not a film review critics site. It is not. It's about space, obviously. But, of course, they are going to be drawn to things such as Star Wars, because, as I said, even though Star Wars is not a science fiction film, for reasons I explained earlier, it is set in space. It involves space travel, for example, and different planets. So space fans are going to be drawn to this particular film. And I don't know how to do a space.com voice. I'm not even going to try. I'll just tell you when I'm speaking and when I'm reading. Okay, so I'm going to start reading now. The Star Wars saga, despite its Wookiee-sized footprint and our popular culture consensus, has always been a loosely strung together series of mostly forgivable plot contrivances, orchestrated through, in its finest moments, stirring action-adventure set pieces featuring heroes overcoming nearly impossible odds. Yeah, the Wookiee-sized footprint thing, yeah. Of course, it's not a Wookiee, it's a hospital porter. As I said, Peter Mayhew, the man who used to animate Chewbacca, apart from in this film and the Last Jedi, was Peter Mayhew. Yeah. Now, and he was still actually employed before he died, sadly, on the last two films as a special Chewbacca consultant. Now, the plot contrivances, I don't think that's fair. It's actually quite neatly put together. Things flow one from another. And the action-adventure set pieces, absolutely, yeah, and the heroes overcoming nearly impossible odds. I'll start reading again. The Rise of Skywalker, co-director, co-writer J.J. Abrams, overly self-conscious attempts not to overtly denounce but clearly course-correct Rian Johnson's divisive The Last Jedi continues that tradition. Yeah, it's me speaking again now. The Last Jedi. I mean, you can look at my review, link in the description box for my review of that on her Panmo TV. And I was not impressed by it. It had a lot wrong with it, even though, as always, I was like a bit blown by it after I'd seen it in the cinema. And I was I'm sort of breathtaken into silence, one of the effects that the big screen has on me. It wasn't sort of really... I look back on it now and in a pretty dim light. I really do. I'll start reading again. Abandoning any attempts to further develop the lead quartet of characters, Rey, Finn, Poe, Kylo Ren. Alright, I don't think that's fair. That's me speaking again now. I think there are annoying elements to this. For example, I mean, even their names, Rey, Finn, Poe. There's just single syllable names, which is a bit... and it sounds a little bit contrived. Yeah, that does. I mean, I think they do develop in this film. Like I said, they've been left pretty much in stasis from the beginning of The Force Awakens, but now they kind of come into their own in this last episode. I'll start reading again. Besides Daisy Ridley's Rey, the film is a breakneck series of missions involving the heroes locating numerous MacGuffins that are the key to numerous Deus Ex Machinas. Hang on, let me just look this up a minute. MacGuffins. I've heard Sargon talks about MacGuffins. What's a MacGuffin? Hang on, I'm going to Google it. Right, MacGuffin. Okay. An object or device in a film or book which serves merely as a trigger for the plot. Oh, right. Okay. Thanks. Because Sargon mentioned the word MacGuffin as well in his review. Because I have watched Sargon of Akkad's review now. And I just wondered what that meant. Okay, keys to numerous Deus Ex Machinas, which all stack on top of one another to build into a final confrontation. Predicted, of course, on the bad guys not accounting for a fatal vulnerability. I don't think... No, alright, I think that's... I don't know if that's fair. Now, the Deus Ex Machina. A Deus Ex Machina is a plot device which is... a kind of it's an annoying thing actually. It's where some kind of really annoying little get out of jail free or cop out thing happens, which sort of saves the day, which doesn't evolve out of the story naturally. So, for example, someone's being chased down a corridor by an evil monster or something like that, and you wonder how the hell they're going to escape. Then, quite by chance, the ceiling collapses on top of the monster, and the person running away is perfectly safe. That's an example of a Deus Ex Machina. It literally means a god out of the machine. And were there Deus Ex Machinas in it? I don't know. I'm not sure. I have to think about that. I didn't detect any... There's none that I actually detected in terms of Deus Ex Machinas. I didn't... There's none that sort of stuck out in my mind, because I do spot these sorts of things. And the bad guy's fatal vulnerability. Well, the thing is, the fatal vulnerability of Palpatine was something which emerged earlier, which was that Rey had two lightsabers, which, as I said earlier, had this kind of almost Christian type ability to form a cross and repel the energy, the force lightning coming out of the Emperor's hands. Now, Sargon was moaning about this, and so was Dave Cullen. I know Sargon was. I can't remember if Dave Cullen did. He did a shorter review. Cullen took he took a softer line than Sargon did. But they did moan. Well, why doesn't he just stop casting this force lightning at her if she's reflecting it back at him? And it's like, maybe that's not fair, I think, because for all you know, once he starts doing that, he can't stop, or something being reflected back at him stops him from stopping it. I don't know. Oh, anyway, I'll carry on reading. Abrams, of course, borrowed heavily on that premise in 2015's The Force Awakens when he supplanted the Death Star with the Starkiller base. Yeah, I think maybe I should put a link in the description box also to my review of that, because it was a written review on her Panwo voice. Actually, if you read that, you'll see very clearly, and I read it back now. I actually saw the film on New Year's Day 2016, and I look back at it now and I read it, and you'll see quite clearly what I mean when I say I'm not able to be objective when I have just emerged from the big screen experience of watching a film. But in terms of Space.com, supplanting the Starkiller base was quite. I get a bit sort of sentimental about that, because they actually, the Starkiller base is this. It's like a Death Star, but they've actually embedded it in a planet. And I'll carry on reading anyway. In Rise, he pays homage to the original Star Wars finale, The Return of the Jedi, by making the First Order's latest superweapon highly dependent on an antenna. Oh, that's right, because in Return of the Jedi, they have to like blow up an antenna on the Endor, because that's where they're casting the force field from. And the same thing happened. Basically, the same thing happens in this particular film, although it all changes. I mean, the First Order, or the Final Order as they call it, actually, they very cleverly actually switched their command to the big spaceship where the general is on, whatever his name is, the evil English accent guy they always have leading the Empire, and so it's not quite the same as Return of the Jedi. Anyway, I'll carry on reading. And all that would have been fine. The necessary contrivances could have been overlooked in grand Star Wars tradition, if not for the fact that the entire premise of the film is built on another, too critical to overlook contrivance. Right, I'm interested to see what that is, because I'm not sure the contrivances are a part. I mean, the antenna on the planet was not really a contrivance. I mean, it's perfectly legitimate that they would have some kind of force field, and it would need some kind of generator. I mean, the thing about science fiction like this, or fantasy, futuristic space fantasy, is you can put these things in. I mean, I think they're being a bit overcritical here, because I mean, look, I mean, contrivances everywhere. I mean, in all things of this kind of nature. I mean, look at Doctor Who. Every time they want to, they don't even, in Doctor Who, they've got an infinite number of plot devices, because it involves time travel, it involves interdimensional travel. If someone dies, they just go back in time and revive them. It's anyway. I'll carry on reading. The rise of Skywalker would collapse onto itself if the return of Emperor Palpatine is not revealed by his own hand to literally everyone in the galaxy. And if you consider that a spoiler, wait until you find out that's the first sentence of the opening crawl. Oh right, that's the famous Star Wars titles where the words scroll past. Yeah, it's true. Palpatine has returned, and he's kind of a clone. Well, he's kind of like he's, for some reason, I don't know what. Perhaps bringing him back was the wrong idea. Maybe they should have had a new evil person like Snoke in the last film. A new evil person. He's a clone apparently. They've got the same actor playing him. Must be a lot older now. And of course, there's all these other clones. It's like there's millions of clones. It's like the boys from Brazil. There's loads of Palpatine clones sort of in this entire chamber which the Emperor's in, and he has been sort of like telling everyone that he's back, which I suppose is a bit strange, isn't it? I don't know why. Maybe he likes to gloat. After all, that's what the Illuminati do, don't they? Putting them symbols on everything. Anyway, I'll carry on reading. That's right. What should have likely been a major plot point of The Rise of Skywalker, or The Last Jedi, hold that thought, is meta revealed in written copy. And it has to be, because the finale's whole structure goes away if he remained in hiding, as logic dictates, until the superweapon is ready. I think they're being sarcastic there. That size plot hole is hard to forgive. I don't know about that. Hang on, because the finale structure goes away if he remains in hiding. Oh, I see. So if he just not told anyone, that's not true though, because he actually does blow up a planet. I mean, these Star Destroyers with planet killer like Death Star weapons, they do succeed in blowing up at least one planet. So isn't that the same thing? That's not a plot hole. Anyway, I'll carry on reading. And it's seemingly a symptom of the real problem with Rise. It really does want to sort of forget The Last Jedi happened. Right, me speaking now. Well, to be honest, who wouldn't want to forget The Last Jedi happened? Okay, back to the text. And maybe that approach will be celebrated by critics of that film, of which I'm not one, but it leads to more problems that in turn must fix unsuccessfully. Right. I don't know what that exactly means. Should be celebrated by critics of that film. I'm not sure what that means, that bit. Carry on reading. Nobody gets the short end of the stick more than Adam Driver's Kylo Ren. The plot adjustments render arguably the series' most interesting character into more of a pawn than a catalyst, and something of an afterthought when it's all said and done, despite an attempt to rebuild his importance in the final act in ways that are sure to divide fans. I'm not sure he was really any different. I mean, he was really playing. He was pretty much carrying on from where he left off in the previous films. But there is this rather interesting. There's this rather interesting, albeit slightly more watered down, kind of road to Damascus experience he has, or which happens, just in the last act, like I said. So he then in a sense, that's what is injected into the story, which allows Rey to defeat Palpatine. I mean, it's because although Palpatine actually does cast Kylo into the actual pit, but Kylo comes back out again. It would have probably been more satisfying actually if Kylo Ren or Ben Solo had, to give him his proper name, had actually done something to have helped Rey defeat the Emperor. I must admit, because he comes in to help Rey, and he does kill some of the guards with his lightsaber and stuff like that. He does achieve that. Yeah, then he kind of like the Emperor. The first thing he does, the Palpatine, is like use his Force powers to cast Ben into the off the cliff, which he manages to climb back up, and he's uninjured. He then later dies, but if he'd actually in some way done something to join in with Rey and beating Palpatine, that would have been better. That would have been a lot better. It would have been a better story. Rise never feels grounded. It never feels like a whole, complete movie, just a series of episodes that starts in the middle. I'm not sure that's true, actually. Anyway, like Kylo, Finn and Poe are just there to be supporting characters in Rey's journey. And attempts to give Poe a backstory and Finn some explanation for his original hero turn feel tacked on and perfunctory. Maybe they are kind of like second rate in this film. Although, as I said, they do become more whole, and especially in the relationship with each other and indeed with Rey, because they develop a very interesting friendship between each other. It is like I say, it's a bit of a bromance, but at the same time, there's almost like a hint of a love triangle with Rey. Now, these stories are never really explained. It's very implicit. There's never any actual. I don't think there's any point where you actually think this is going to wholly come about. Unlike in the original trilogy with Han and Leia and Luke, it's very different here. Anyway. Ooh. Carrie Fisher's goodbyes, Leia. Right. Abraham relies on callbacks and cameos to instill a sense of closure. Well, that's true. He brings back all the old characters, including Lando Calrissian. But Lando's return is actually very well done, and it's very it brings out nostalgia. And maybe there is an element of what Sargon said about how all this final trilogy is it's almost like a nostalgic facsimile, almost like it's almost like a supporting band of itself, or a tribute band to itself, as Cullen said. And it's all they're just riding on the exhaust fumes of the original trilogy, and it's time to let it go and just invent some new stories, which I think is true. And indeed, this kind of is what the person says at the end of this review, because they do here they finish by saying this: while it would have been controversial had Abrams moved forward with what was established in The Last Jedi, the rise of Skywalker might have had a fighting chance to give the series a satisfying send-off. Abrams' intentions are likely pure and driven by his sense of what Star Wars finale should be, but by trying to rewrite the rules of the third act, fans are left with the worst of both worlds. An attempt to be sentimental that instead looks like a lot of second-guessing, and a lot of overcompensation with choices that will likely live in infamy rather than cherished memories. I think what they are saying here is basically what I did, it's lost energy, and I think that's true. Unfortunately, I think Star Wars should be treated as it is, as an old film we can watch and enjoy, and rather than having new releases. Right, now this is a review by cnet.com, and I haven't done those before, but this is like a kind of anthology of reviews, and I'll just read a few of them out here. This is I'll read a good one out first. This is probably the most what's the word? Complimentary review here, and this is by Roger Cheng of the New York Times. I'll give it to J.J. Abrams. He knows how to create a polished. I'll do a New York Times voice. It goes. I'll give it to J.J. Abrams. He knows how to create a polished, exciting film that includes all the elements a Star Wars fan could want. That sounds a bit like Richard Dolan, doesn't it? Oh, sorry, Richard Dolan. The Rise of Skywalker is a relentless thrill ride, moving from one plot point to another, and offering plenty of fantastic set pieces and nods to elements of the original trilogy. Star Wars is back, I thought. Yeah, the nods to the original trilogy maybe are overly sentimental, as the previous reviewer said, the one for Space.com, but that is one of the things I liked about it, I think. And honestly, when you think Chewie is dead, I mean, I wept aloud in the cinema, and I don't often do that, but I did. I was shocked by the thought of Chewie dying. It was horrible, and that's probably the biggest of that kind of element, or that he's talking about here. I'll carry on. But here's the thing about Abrams' films: they move so quickly, you don't really have time to process everything that's going on. Maybe, but no more than the others. I think it seems the actual pace of the film is pretty similar to the original. Anyway, after the excitement of another Star Wars film subsided, I had time to think about it. I realized it hits many of the same plot points as Return of the Jedi. It's not quite the retread that The Force Awakens was. Yeah, The Force Awakens was essentially A New Hope rehashed with new characters, a planet called... I'll give you an idea. I mean, the planet Jakku. I know it's part of the Star Wars universe that was in some of the spin-off books and things, but Jakku is essentially Tatooine. It's a desert planet with the same kind of things on it. But there are enough similarities that you can easily see parallel structure. For some, especially fans who hated The Last Jedi, that might come as a relief. The Rise of Skywalker kicks into place a lot of the pieces set up in The Force Awakens. It is slickly produced and massively entertaining, even if it comes off as predictable. So that's a good review. Anyway, let's have this is so dear. I'll do something else here. Let's read a bad one. Hang on. Here we go. It's bad. I'll do a. How would you do a bad one? All right. I'll try and do it in a kind of Ebenezer Scrooge voice, seeing as I'm recording this just the day before Christmas Eve. It's bad. It's really bad, humbug. I'm trying to be self-aware about this, trying to understand that given the negative reaction to The Last Jedi, The Rise of Skywalker is a movie that could never exist in a vacuum or separate itself from the culture wars that continue to consume all light and reason. Of course it's not going to exist in a vacuum. As I said, the culture war thing, maybe they've learnt their lesson, as I said earlier, but the culture war situation was something that I think they made a deliberate effort to avoid. As I said earlier, and indeed that Dave Cullen has mentioned, it seems that the tide is turning on the whole SJW thing, and some filmmakers are learning this lesson, and it appears this is one of them. And the new Ghostbusters trailer, I talked about the new Ghostbusters trailer earlier. Anyway, that being said, I thought this movie sucked, and I hated it with every fibre of my being. Humbug, blah. The Rise of Skywalker felt like a movie written, produced and directed by a really bad Reddit thread. Oh my god, he's really, yes, he's definitely not happy, this chap. What's his name? Mark Serrels from Sydney, Australia. Anyway, I'll carry on. A movie that unravels... Oh, I should have done this in Australian voice, shouldn't I? But it's too late now. I'm sticking with Scrooge. A movie that unravels all The Last Jedi's most bold and subversive choices. That's good, isn't it? Rey is a nobody, the daughter of drunkards who sold her off for booze money. Well, that's what's... No, hang on. That was kind of what was implied before, wasn't it? What was said before about her family, because there's a lot of mystery about Rey's background. Anyway, he carries on saying, "No, bugger that. She's Emperor Palpatine's granddaughter." Well, look, the idea of a simple person who doesn't know much about their own background finding out that they actually have a quite fateful background is a part of the Star Wars lore. I mean, this is what Luke Skywalker was, wasn't he? Anyway. Poe Dameron's gung-ho heroism is a clumsy expression of toxic masculinity. No, he's Han Solo version 2. Alright. Well, that's actually true. As I said earlier, he's essentially Han Solo under another name. Yeah. Anyway, I'll carry on down here. Beyond big choices, The Rise of Skywalker is a frantically paced movie burdened with terrible dialogue. It's got a fast pace, yeah. As for the terrible dialogue, there are moments when there's little bits that are put in the film and I wonder what they're doing here. And I already mentioned the time when Finn says to Rey, they think they're about to die being sunk in quicksand, and Finn says to Rey, "There's something I need to tell you I've never told you before." That bit I was talking about earlier. That is a bit that's a bit off. Now another is that Lando sort of sits down next to the princess, the princess with the horses, whose name I can't remember, and they have a very interesting conversation, which is something like, it goes, "Oh, do you know anything about your background?" "No, I don't." She said, "Oh, neither do I. Maybe we should have a look." And it's a warmth between them, which I suppose if Lando had been a few years younger, and if this princess had been a few years older, you could call sexual and romantic. But it's a weird conversation that seems to be a bit stuck in there, and you don't know. It's a bit sort of like it's bootstrapping itself into the script, and you wonder what it means. Why is it there? Where's it go? Where's it come from? Especially when you know that's the end of the bloody series. So there is a bit that the dialogue has some things to be desired. Anyway, he carries on. It misses the poetry of The Last Jedi's best moments. I didn't know that The Last Jedi had any best moments. Anyway, outside a few key moments, it's utterly bereft of imagination. Even the best scene, Kylo Ren's redemption, is ruined by this movie's insatiable need to cram in as many reference points as possible. Humbug. I don't know. Anyway, he goes on. But perhaps the worst part of The Rise of Skywalker is Kelly Marie Tran's erasure. After being chased off social media via a targeted harassment campaign, Tran's sidelining in The Rise of Skywalker feels like a perfect metaphor for the Rose movie's cowardice. Kelly Marie Tran, who's that? Is that Rose? Just a sec. Oh yeah, right. Thank goodness for Google and the pause button. Yeah, Kelly Marie Tran, also known as Tran Loan, is an actress. She played Rose Tico. That's right, she was Rose. Now Rose plays quite a big role in the scene in The Last Jedi. She's an important part of the story when there's this scene where basically, which is exactly the same as the Empire in Empire Strikes Back, where AT-ATs and the AT-ATs are the big walkers. They attack the rebel base like they did on Hoth. The only difference is there's no snow and ice. There's salt. It's a salt plane, and she plays a big role in that. And they make it salt just so they can say it's different, which is, yes, that's annoying. That is annoying, I do confess. But yeah, she actually plays. She doesn't really say much in this film. I don't know. You know, it's almost like she's not in it. So yeah, I do agree with him that. I mean, was it the targeted harassment campaign on social media? Well, unfortunately, that does happen, and it's bloody awful. And I'm sorry that happened to her. I really am. Anyone who did that is really nasty. But is that the reason she was written out of the script this time? I don't know. But she plays a very minor role in this particular film. The most interesting scene was what Sargon of Akkad noticed, and when I saw it, I thought he would actually when I saw it in the movie, is when she sort of issues a few put downs to this rather corpulent rebel pilot, who Sargon calls the neckbeard. He doesn't actually have a beard, but Sargon calls him the neckbeard guy. Where he says something that she thinks is a bit silly, and she sort of does a nasty little passive-aggressive manoeuvre on him, which is actually was a bit stupid. But he gives her a good rejoinder. But I thought to myself, again, that's a bad piece of dialogue, I must admit. Calculating and pandering to the worst elements of your audience is not a good thing, but is it? But but it's what Rise of Skywalker does to the entirety of its runtime. I think that's enough for Star Wars for me. Thanks. Okay, Merrill Serrels of Sydney. I must admit, I think he's being unfair here, but he's right about some things, and indeed, this is time to say goodbye to Star Wars, definitely. Now, this is probably the weirdest thing anyone has said about this particular film, and it's also in CNET, and it's one that Sargon goes into big time in his follow-up video, because Sargon of Akkad has done a follow-up video in which he reviews some of the reviews of the film, where the feminists and the SJWs actually go on about this particular point in the movie. And the funny thing is about this particular point in the movie is it's only 2 seconds long, and it's so short and so unobtrusive that I missed it. I don't remember this part at all, but apparently it happens in the final scene during the celebrations. Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker has a big LGBTQ moment. Now, and it says here, commentary, representation matters, and the new Star Wars movie delivers, sort of. Well, it's always sort of, because nothing you ever do will be enough for the SJWs. But they always say, well, we've achieved much, but we want more! Anyway, she says here, this particular viewer, who is called Bonnie Burton, says, when I watched the original Star Wars film as a young girl in the 70s and 80s, I only wanted to be Princess Leia. I wanted to date her. I didn't know I would identify as bisexual many years later, but it was a girl crush on Leia that grabbed me from the get-go. I've been a Star Wars fan from the first time I saw the movie at drive-in 4 decades ago. As a kid, I twisted my long hair into Princess Leia cinnamon buns. I ended up working for Lucasfilm as an adult, which was a dream come true. My fandom runs deep. So this week, watching Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker, I cheered aloud in a crowded theatre when I saw 2 women kiss passionately on the screen. For those who might have missed it, I did miss it, yeah. The kiss happens in the background between the character Commander Lama Dacey and a female resistance pilot. Right, I did miss it. I mean, there was lots of group hugging, as I said at the end. There was lots of 3-way hugs and 4-way hugs at the end. There's this big long epilogue, as I explained earlier. And I didn't see this. I really didn't. I'll carry on here. The smooch takes place at the end of the movie and goes by in a blink, but it was a big deal to me. Okay, well, I'm pleased you enjoyed it. Anyway, while the kiss was great and a welcome surprise, it should only be considered a positive first step. Alright, right, here we go. We need more. I wish the movie had at least one LGBTQ main character, and not just 2 minor characters sharing a 3-second kiss, but I remain hopeful. Well, you see, now we get into the Bechdel test and all these sorts of things, and I've already talked about how against that I am. I'm not suggesting that what do they call it? LGBTQ. I try and remember all these letters. I'm not saying that these characters should be excluded from a film, but when you put them in just for the sake of it, to out of some kind of cultural Marxist principle, then you're on a step to disaster. In fact, it was this particular film which this lady Bonnie, whatever her name is, what Bonnie likes so much, and this little moment here, it was this particular film that seems to be waking up to that particular problem that has occurred in previous films in all franchises, including this one. They're moving away from that sort of thing. And she goes on here to explain, I'm not going to read this out verbatim, but she says that in screenings in Dubai, the same-sex kiss scene has been removed. Yes, indeed. Dubai is in the United Arab Emirates, which is a state in the Middle East, which is primarily, in fact, almost exclusively Sunni Muslim, and the official religion is the law there is based around based around the Sharia, the holy law of Islam. So there's no wonder there, and so that's something that perhaps you should go and criticise the Dubai government before you start criticising Lucasfilm. Anyway. She says, I've been waiting to witness a kiss like this in my favourite sci-fi franchise for what feels like forever. J.J. Abrams hinted in The Force Awakens that Star Wars would eventually have gay characters. Well, yeah, okay. In fact, Abrams said in 2006, it seems insanely narrow-minded and counterintuitive to say there wouldn't be a homosexual character in that world. Perhaps, but do you have to insert them in there specifically? That's the problem I have with it. It's essentially, if you start preaching to the audience about how they should embrace equality and feel guilty for being evil white heterosexual men, then you're going to alienate your audience, as I've explained many times in many of these reviews. Oh, anyway, she carries on. In 2018, I was also thrilled to see a young Lando Calrissian come out as a possible pansexual character in Solo, a Star Wars story. It was because it was the first time I saw a non-straight character in the Star Wars universe. I actually never saw that film, Solo, a Star Wars story. I mean, I know people who saw it, didn't like it. Most of them, I'd like to make my own mind up. I've simply not seen it. I actually don't care about what Lando Calrissian is in terms of his sexuality. The character himself, as I said, is a very good one, and he's a character who starts off as an enemy and becomes a friend. It's a very interesting part of the story, actually, with Lando Calrissian. It's different to that of Darth Vader and Kylo Ren. His private life is none of my business, and I don't care about it. Maybe because you're a cisgender heterosexual male, Ben! Well, I know, alright. I know people are saying that. But I am, and so be it. I don't feel guilty about that. Anyway, here he goes. Even though Donald Grover, the actor who played the young Lando, outed Lando as pansexual, we never got to see him smooch anyone on screen, which would have publicly confirmed Lando's sexuality once and for all. It was a bit vague. Seeing Disney and Lucasfilm approve the addition of a lesbian kiss in a major Star Wars movie is a huge step towards more inclusivity. I'm excited to see what that franchise does next to represent more gay characters in a galaxy far, far away. Okay. But the thing about it is, Bonnie, you're not. I don't think you're going to see what you want, because what I think this lady wants to see, this lady Bonnie Burton wants to see, is Star Wars comply with this Bechdel test. This idea that you have a quota of certain types of people you need in a particular film, and you should exclude elements that are not of that quota. Simply for themselves. They've got nothing to do with the story. You just have to have them in there, not because of the story, but because of this cultural Marxist political agenda and the ideals associated with it. Now, if that's what she wants, I don't think she's going to see it, because, as I've been explaining, this film represents a departure from that kind of culture. If she may well see in the Star Wars universe films where there are non-straight characters. We've already had lots of non-white characters. We may, indeed, Lando was a non-white character in the original trilogy. We're going to see, I think, possibly what's the word she used? Pansexual LGBTQ characters. But if they're going to be in the story, then hopefully they will be in the story for a reason, and their sexuality will either be something that is irrelevant to their status in the story, or it'll be a specific part of the story. If that's the case, then I will not object to it. But if they start going back to this situation where you have this fogging up of the entire movies just for the sake of it, with this kind of agenda, then they're just going to be creating a bad movie, and you probably, maybe as much as anyone else, will be disappointed in the end. But so that is something I wanted to touch on. I know Sargon and Dave and the others have gone into it a lot more than I have, because Sargon has analysed a lot of the other people who brought this point up, and I'm not going to bother talking about them because it's already been done by Sargon and others. And now, of course, did you think I'd forgotten? We are going to come to the Guardian. Yes. This is Mark Kermody's film of the week, Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. Mark Kermody is the Observer film critic, and yep, he looks exactly like a typical Guardian soy boy, doesn't he? Then again, he's given it 3 stars, so maybe there is a bit of oomph in him after all. Well, let's give him a chance, shall we, and see what he has to say. Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker review. May the 9th be with you. May the 9th be with you. Is that supposed to be a pun, Mark? It's not. It doesn't even fit. Honestly. J.J. Abrams proves a safe pair of hands in this crowd-pleasing but unadventurous finale to the latest trilogy of the space opera. Unadventurous? Oh, right. Crowd-pleasing? Well, speak for yourself. Anyway, ending a Star Wars trilogy can be as tricky as destroying a Death Star. Actually, ending the Star Wars trilogy is much more difficult because there were actually three Death Stars in the actual series of Star Wars, and they were all destroyed. So yeah, I mean, but I get your point you're making. Yeah. Anyway, it says here it requires a rare mix of battlefield experience and blind faith in the Force. Yeah. Well, and no one ever said to J.J. Abrams, oh, use the Bechdel test, J.J. Use the Bechdel test. No, that didn't happen. And if he did try it and it didn't work. But anyway, those presumably are the qualifiers that put J.J. Abrams back into the pilot seat for this safe but solid series finale. That's right, of course, he did. I mean, everyone probably thought that Rian Johnson would be directing again, but he didn't. I don't know what conversations went on in the studio, but anyway, after Jurassic World director Colin Trevorrow, who was originally signed to direct, failed to take control of this blockbuster ship. Oh, Colin Trevorrow was going to direct. I see. Was that before the Rian Johnson was brought in which case, that's not true. Johnson wasn't actually kicked out. Colin Trevorrow. It'd have been interesting actually to have a Cornishman actually directing the final Star Wars, because Trevorrow, of course, is a very Cornish name. Anyway, Mark goes on. Turning his back on the controversies of The Last Jedi, Abrams conjures a mix of crowd-pleasing spectacles and unadventurous storytelling. Why unadventurous? I mean, come on, Mark, let's face it. When they all land there's this great scene where the good guys land, and they actually land their landing ships on the top of a Star Destroyer, and they come out with their horses. It's really good. I mean, how they breathe in space is never actually explored, but I think that's a really wonderful piece of cinema. I mean, it reminds me a little bit of Flash Gordon. Do you remember the Flash Gordon movie? It's absolutely fantastic. Flash Gordon film. It reminds me very much of that. Now, you can't call that unadventurous. You really can't. Steering a whiz-bang course between a series of oddly familiar set pieces as he ties up some long-running narrative threads while leaving others hanging. Yeah, that's true. Now, the set pieces, of course, are... I don't think it's a criticism to say there are set pieces, like we've already talked about. The various kinds of space battles and the lightsaber battles going on simultaneously, things like that. That's just the way Star Wars is. I mean, it wouldn't be Star Wars without those things. Leaving others hanging, yeah, there was a lot left hanging in this. There's some odd scenes. I mean, there's something I didn't mention. Just after the scene where Finn, as I said, there's that very abortive conversation between Rey and Finn, as they're sinking into the quicksand. There's another rather strange thing that happens. It's quite a touching scene, but it doesn't really make much sense. When they go through this quicksand and they fall through at the bottom of a quicksand pit. I don't know exactly how that works in terms of physics, but they land in a tunnel, and it turns out this tunnel is a burrow of a giant snake, and this snake comes up and it's hurt in some way, and Finn heals it with her force healing, and that to me is, I'm not exactly sure what that scene is doing in there, but the snake then goes away and leaves them alone. It's very odd indeed. Anyway, Mark goes on. The result is a handsome, if creaky, and oddly inconsequential final film. Well, handsome, yes. Creaky? Is it creaky? What do you mean inconsequential? I mean, it's actually, I think it's probably the most dramatic of the three Skywalkers, I think. Anyway, it lurches around the galaxy at light speed without actually getting anywhere, as it steers a course between the inventive and the inevitable. I thought you said inventive, and then you also called it unimaginative and unadventurous. Sorry, you said unadventurous. So you didn't say unimaginative, you said unadventurous. Hang on, inventive. I don't see why. What you mean? Because those things too sound contradictory to me. Back in 1983, the first Star Wars trilogy ended less with a bang than a whimsy, as the Return of the Jedi failed to live up to its series' best predecessor, The Empire Strikes Back. It was memorably dismissed as having a bunch of Muppets. I actually thought I didn't realise that, because I loved the Return of the Jedi. I do think Empire Strikes Back was the finest of all of them. But Empire, I think they may be referring to the Ewoks, and I thought the Ewoks were great actually. They weren't overdone. I mean, they were humorous, but they were like, there was like scenes like where there were scenes of Ewoks dying in the battle on Endor. Just you could see that Lucas was making sure that it wasn't too light-hearted. The scene where the Ewoks are during the Battle of Endor. I thought that was quite good. There's this very sad scene where the Ewok dies, and as a child, I mean, I was a little kid when that film came out, and I cried when I saw that. I wouldn't do that now. It takes Chewie dying to make me cry over Star Wars today. But anyway, Mark, what's his name, goes on. Fast forward to 2005 and Revenge of the Sith. I only saw that film once in the cinema, and that was the last of the prequels, I think. Anyway, for all its manifest flaws, proved to be a low highlight of George Lucas's terrible prequel trilogy, ploddingly executed yet still somehow preferable to the insanities of The Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. Inanities, not insanities. Yeah, I mean the prequels. We've gone over the prequels have been dissected like a piece of meat on a autopsy table. I mean, there's no need to go over them again. But calling them terrible is not fair. They didn't live up to the expectations. But again, as I've explained, this has got a lot to do with the fact that people were judging them in comparison to the original trilogy. I don't think they were terrible. The prequel trilogy was not terrible. It was a bit sort of like lackluster compared to the original. It had a lot of good elements to it, I thought. Not Jar Jar Binks, of course. Oh, God. They should have left him out. Anyway, with the rise of Skywalker, the stakes are raised, not only because it attempts to wrap up a story arc spanning 3 trilogies, but also it follows what proved to be the most divisive episode of the entire series. That's true, yes. That is a... I know, that's actually true. The Last Jedi. Which I cover, as I said, go to the link in the description box. You'll see my reviews of both The Last Jedi and The Force Awakens. I've put links to both in the description box. After the reinvigorating thrills of The Force Awakens, the best Star Wars film since Empire... Oh, you must be bloody joking. It's nothing compared to Return of the Jedi. The Force Awakens was... Oh, it had its good things, but then... the old favourites are dropping like flies. Han Solo dies. Oh, it's gold. That's awful. Oh my God! Did I just drop a big spoiler there? If you've not seen The Force Awakens. Oh shit! I've just told you that Han Solo dies. Oh my God! I better not mention that Darth Vader is Luke Skywalker's father, should I? Anyway, he goes on. Some fans howled with frenzied derision at Rian Johnson's The Last Jedi, feeling betrayed by its somewhat iconoclastic take on the series' ever-expanding mythology. Well, yes, there was some awful... it was bloody awful in many ways. I mean, the worst thing was Luke Skywalker doing... basically becoming a hermit on some island on some ocean planet. That was awful. That was a... And of course it's because he's a white male, isn't it? I mean, they were still in their SJW phase then, which I think this is what I mean when I say I think this latest film is a departure from that. But, it seemed disrespectful to that character. They portray him as sort of like an old guy, which of course he is older now. I mean, but he's got this big long grey beard. He looks like Gandalf in The Last Jedi, and he acts old as well. And I don't like seeing Luke Skywalker like that. Anyway, he says that this is a complaint that Abrams appears to have taken to heart. Yes, he has. Stylistically, the rise of Skywalker returns to the aesthetics of The Force Awakens, juggling rocket-fueled action sequences, dogfights, desert chases, and saber battles abound, with straight-faced dark versus light standoffs. Yes, again, that's a key factor of it's The Force Awakens. Also, probably more The Return of the Jedi. I think it's more like The Return of the Jedi than any other Star Wars movie. Retaining the thread of humour that dates back to A New Hope, while still taking the unfolding events deadly seriously. I didn't see any real humour in it. Well, there's a bit of humour in this film. I thought that the computer hacker was quite funny because he's like a cross between an Ewok and a Gremlin, and he sort of speaks some weird language that only C-3PO knows. And even when he's had his memory erased, he can still speak 6 billion languages. So presumably that part of his memory is like a ROM cartridge or something. But that's the only humour that's really in the film that I spotted. I didn't see any others. Oh, there's this scene. Well, there's this kind of scene where they land on a planet where there's all these aliens having a fiesta of some kind, and some of the aliens are like the weird thing from A New Hope in the cantina, the one that gets his arm cut off by Obi-Wan. Rey is approached by this very sweet little alien child that puts this thing around her neck, and he's a really cute alien, which is like I think it's one of those Watto things, which the thing that was flying in the prequel, the little flying buzzing thing. But then Kylo somehow he reaches out through the Force and he pulls it off her neck. That's a weird element to it, the fact that you can like teleport. But the Kylo, there's a weird kind of blending of locations with the Kylo Ren Rey interaction, where one moment they're in one room and then in another, but they're in different spots. It's something that's been going on through the series, so I don't quite understand. Anyway, while Rian Johnson delighted in wrong-footing viewer expectations, Luke comically ditching a sacred talismanic object raised laughs, gasps, and shrieks of dismay in equal measure. Yeah, that I think was awful. That was something that sort of overlapped the end of The Force Awakens and the beginning of Last Jedi, because Rey approaches him and hands him his lightsaber, and he throws it into the sea. And of course, she gets it back in the end because with the Force. But that was that was awful. That was. And again, that's the very first thing Luke does when he comes back into the story. I mean, what a horrible way to reintroduce an old character. Oh, here we go. Abrams keeps things closer to home, reviving that strange sense of quasi-mystical cod reverence that was the hallmark of Lucas's original productions. Oh yeah, I think there was a sort of back to the roots attempt with this. Whether he succeeded or not, I'm not sure. Anyway, this guy just goes into the plot here. I'll skip this bit because he goes into the plot. I'll leave that here. Both Daisy Ridley and Adam Driver, that's the actress who plays Rey and the actor who plays Kylo, rise to the challenge of their roles, with the former increasingly commanding the screen while the latter exhibits vulnerabilities beneath a cracked mask. Yeah, that's what I quite like that about it. As I said, Rey is this. There are some things wrong with Rey. I mean, as I said, there's still this side to her which I thought was that she was originally this very androgynous character, like I say, and she's pretty much asexual, apart from the kiss at the end with Ben Solo. But she still develops, perhaps even through the reflection of this quasi-romance going on between her and Poe and Finn, which is, like I said, only really, it's very, very sort of tacit. It's never explored. Between them, they carry the burden of the film's emotional core. Oh, yeah, it's true, they do. That actually does come out quite well. Other cast members are less well served as they ping-pong around the galaxy, chasing clues and objects that open doors leading to other clues and objects, like players in some vast multi-level video game. Not really. There's just this one thing. What do they call it? The MacGuffin. Which is like this triangular crystal green thing. So that's ping-ponging around. I don't know. That's simply false. For such an essentially simple story, there's a superfluity of plotty exposition. I don't even know what that means. Maybe you have to be a literary editor or a film critic from The Observer to actually understand that. Anyway, bogged down by an underlying risk aversion that promptly undoes any genuinely daring developments. A risk aversion? I didn't see that. I don't know what that means. What we're left with is an entertaining but rather empty greatest hits compilation of familiar riffs, characters and iconic space hardware. A feeling amplified by John Williams' score. Actually, that's true. And that's a good way to put it, a greatest hits compilation. Yeah, that's a very creative and poetic way to describe probably every Star Wars film since the end of the prequels. In other words, the entire Skywalker trilogy. It is greatest hits compilation. That's good. That's a good way to put it. I mean, Dave Cullen describes it as a tribute band to itself. Yeah, and he says here, this revisits key themes from the entire series in an appropriately heart-swelling, tear-jerking fashion. Yeah, I mean, yes, I must admit that. I mean, the heart-swelling thing certainly was a case at the end. Tear-jerking, definitely the scene with Chewie, where just for a few minutes you think Chewbacca is dead. That made me weep out loud in the cinema, like I said. And it is the ending. It's not quite on the scale of the conclusion of Return of the Jedi, which, as I said, is where the film should just completely end. It should be over at that point. And all the Star Wars films, apart from the spin-offs, the main core story should be ended at that point, and it wasn't. So, I mean, there was a reason. I think the prequels weren't a bad idea, but this last trilogy was, I think, a waste of celluloid. I'm afraid to say, despite its good points, it was. It should have just stuck with the prequels and then gone on to spin-offs. That's really how it should have gone from there. Anyway, it says at the end here, support The Guardian from as little as £1 and it only takes a minute. Thank you. You must be bloody joking.
So that was my review of Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker, Star Wars Episode 9. I hope if you go and see the film, you enjoy it, and I hope if you've watched these and got spoilers, it doesn't ruin it too much for you. Thank you for watching a Panwo TV. Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity. Stop the New World Order.